All right, welcome everyone to our monthly question and answer gardening landscape series. Our topic today is going to be a little bit different than just doing Q&As. We're going to wait to answer and chat in your Q&As towards the end because our focus is really what I think everyone is going to have questions and concerns on is the 2021 landscape winter recovery. It's a mess out there, and a lot of plants are got damaged from that unique cold spell that we had. My name is David Rodriguez. I'm the extension horticulturalist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. We're the educational arm of the land grant university, and that's my email address. So if you need any help with your garden or landscape, don't hesitate to send me an email, please. If you need something identified, send quality images, but please do send them attached as part of the email. Not part of the email, excuse me, but attached to the email. So let's go ahead and start. I put these slides together in a kind of a sequence of topics of this landscape winter recovery because these are emails I've been receiving, phone calls, and helping out the media to try to answer what we need to do to get our landscapes back and gardens back from this unique, unusual weather condition we had with this big time freeze we just had. So that's me, David Rodriguez. I don't like to really show my picture when I'm doing it. I get confused looking at myself in the mirror. So if you don't know who I am, don't hesitate to send me an email, and that's the picture of me right there. So what happened? Very unusual. We haven't seen something like this in 100 years. And of course, the populace is much greater in Central and South Texas, San Antonio, and the state of Texas than 100 years ago. So in Central and South Texas, usually our last expected frost date is mid-March, and spring for this year should be coming March 20th. So it's just around the corner. So most of the landscapes, and most of us had over 100 plus hours below freezing temperature. And this is hard, very, very hard on our landscapes. And I can project here just in the San Antonio Bexar County area, millions upon millions of dollars lost in these landscapes. It was a horrific, hard, uniquely hard freeze that we had. So we're going to start out with lawns, and then we have everything subclassified of and answer you chats questions at the end if you have any questions. So lawns, the types of lawns that we predominantly grow are warm season turf grasses, which include St. Augustine, Bermuda, and Zoysia. These types typically go brown or dormant during the winter months. St. Augustine typically goes kind of brownish green, depending how cold it is. We've had very mild winters, so we're not sure on lawns like many of the plants how they're going to respond back. But what we see on this slide is ryegrass, a perennial, a dwarf. We do not recommend annual type ryegrass, and we only oversee very well maintained and healthy Bermuda lawns, typically around the last part of October, early November. So when you see these residential and commercial lawns, sites, sports fields, golf courses, etc., that look green during the winter months, what they do is they overseed with this not annual but perennial or dwarf ryegrass that dies out when it warms up in the springtime. So on your lawns right now, if you planted your lawn 30 days ago or 60 days ago, it's probably not going to bounce back and you might have to replace it. If you had a lawn that was well maintained, like most of your other landscape plants, there's always an opportunity that it will bounce back. So what we need to do is lightly go in there and lightly rake up. If there's a lot of brown clippings from winter kill, lightly rake it up as best you can. Get your lawnmower out there. A well-maintained mower, set it at a high setting, make sure it has sharp blades and it's been well maintained, and kind of tidy up. We normally don't tell folks to catch your grass clippings, but at this time, if you have a lot of brown debris, hay-like debris, kind of pick some of that up. And what's going to happen, particularly on overly stressed lawns that have not been well maintained throughout the year, is weed pressure. So winter weeds that are green at this time, they're trying to put their last push of flowering and setting seeds. So your mower is the best tool in your arsenal to minimize weed pressure. Mow and mow often. Do not let these weeds flower and set seed. Um, because by mowing some of these annual type weeds, what that does, it's going to use their reserves up and often they die out. So mow, mow, mow for the weeds, kind of tidy up, doing a mower at a high setting right now. And if you do have a bagger, make an exception and kind of get some of that brown debris up if they're when you start raking it up. So what we're seeing that is green is winter weeds, and those will be dying out here pretty soon. But if you let them flower and set seed, those seeds potentially one plant will be thousands the following season. So we have two classification of weeds: cool weather and warm weather. Warm weather is just around the corner right now. So what we want to really encourage everyone for warm weather weeds that will be coming up is to put an insurance policy out in your lawn. And that's a use of a broad spectrum pre-emergent herbicide granule. Look for Dimension or Barricade. They're by different brand names. And those are very broad spectrum that they control both grassy and broadleaf weeds. So we need to get that out here pretty quick. And what that does, it doesn't kill the adult winter weeds right now. It will minimize and prevent the warm weather weeds that are dormant, the seeds that are dormant in the soil from coming up. So if you've had a lot of cool weather weeds, then we want to reapply this again in late August, early September. Timing is crucial. We always read and follow label instructions. You put it out like you would do lawn fertilizer. Always read and follow label instructions. Once you get your lawn back to where it needs to be, then you probably don't need to use this type of product. But I really think most folks should, even if they have to replace some lawns, consider putting that. And then in lawns in general, we have to see how they bounce back when it warms up. So late April, May is going to tell you if we need a spot plant or replace some sod out there. For sure, particularly homeowners, golf courses and sports fields do this much more often, multiple times a year. But for residential homeowners, from mid-September through early April, predominantly in Central and South Texas, with ideally being early March to mid-March, now is the ideal time to consider core aerating your lawn. The predominant soil types that most of us have are heavy clay type soils. So if you have indicator weeds that you really can't mow because it's below the turf grass, like summer spurge and some of this winter grasses, a lot of those indicator weeds, the pre-emergent herbicide will work, but they're predominantly there because the soils are very tight and very compacted. So using a core aeration machine, they have 3-inch tines on them, extracts a core of soil. Doing that now, maybe get your neighbors involved. If you have an in-ground sprinkler system, I would make sure you flag the heads and the lateral lines so you don't bust anything up. Then after you core aerate, you put some high-grade premium composted lawn dressing. You don't want too much sand or heavy clay soils. Just feather it out. You do not have to pick up those cores that are extracted, and just feather that out, rake it out, water it in real well. And if you really want to save on watering, and you really want to get this grass going and get better air and oxygen exchange in the soil profile, this will really, without a doubt, help your lawn. Now, being warm season grasses that we mentioned, St. Augustine, Bermudas, and Zoysias before you, or maybe right after you mow, if need be, to tidy up the lawn, set it up at a high mowing. And before you put the insurance policy out, the pre-emergence, you can wait about a week before you core aerate, do the lawn dressing the same day. But before you do this, if you look like you have a lot of dead brown grass blades, don't hesitate to give it a light raking, a light, very, very light raking to get some of that debris up. If you need to tidy it up, you might say, and that will help definitely. Now, the biggest thing, not only in lawns, but in landscapes, with the uncertainty of this plant material from coming up, the worst thing people are doing is they're fertilizing. And that's the worst thing people can do right away. And I see this often on plants that have insect disease, stress. We overwater and we put fertilizer. They think that's the silver bullet, the fix all. Remember, on lawns, we never recommend weed and feed fertilizers. That's a no-no. Extension does not recommend weed and feed fertilizers. But I think mid-April, we should see the lawns wake up. These warm season turf grass should be waking up to typically maybe after the second or third mowing. It might be as late as, instead of mid-April, it might be as early May. So keep an eye on it. This would be the ideal time to put your nutrition out, your supplement nutrition. Remember that lawn dressing, the compost is a soil amendment. It is not a fertilizer. You still need to fertilize. And this would be the ideal time and the ideal ratio of 1959 slow release fertilizer, 5 to 7 pounds. And this is the same fertilizer you can use also as an all-purpose, your spring or fall vegetable garden, your traditional beds, as well as trees, shrubs, flower beds. So it's an all-purpose. We've had it on the market here for 42 years. So it's a good price point, and it covers a large area. Plus it's time release and slow release. So that's a little bit about lawns, not only a little bit about winter recovery if need be. If the lawn is too weedy or not recovered by that mid-April, early May timeframe, you might have to resod, including potentially spraying a non-selective herbicide out there, killing everything that's green and growing, and resodding for the spring. And as we all know, going through droughty times and water bills and things like that in our landscapes, maybe we don't need as much lawn as we might have had in the past. So look at that as well. So let's talk about some plants specific. I've been getting inundated big time with emails and the media, and it's very, very heartbreaking, almost driving around this area looking at all this stress and dead. And you can even smell the death of some of these plants, unfortunately. Palms, remember, sago palm is a palm-like plant, not a true palm, and all your other palms. What we need to do now and here pretty soon in the next couple weeks is 100% remove all fronds that are 100% brown, okay? Make sure you have sharp pruners. Sharpen them real good, have a quality pruner or loppers, and simply remove them. So we don't want to just be trimming and pruning right when brush pickup is. Remember, pruning or training a plant is a dwarfing and rejuvenation process. So what we're trying to do is clean up the ugly, and hopefully these plants have strong trunks, and all the new growth, the new fronds come out of the center. So we're just being patient and waiting till the soil warms up, and hopefully, particularly on the sago palms, if the top has died out, usually they have pups or little offshoots on the bottom. We can retrain them as a bush, so we have to wait. But 100% if the frond leaf is brown, dead looking, remove it. If any of these palms have 50-50 or some green on them, particularly closest to the main trunk of the plant, cut it in half. The more green we can leave on these plants, the better. Those fronds that are semi-green and brown, typically with time, they will brown out 100%. And hopefully by then we have a plant that has survived, we hope, and new fronds emerge. So we need to do some cleaning up on these. And, sago palms and a lot of these landscape palms are very, very expensive. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I think the Mexican fan palms that we saw in the 80s, most of those died out with those freezes, particularly 85. I think most of the Mexican fan palms are dead. It's crazy because we plant a lot of queen palms here. And every year that we have unique winters, these queen palms die, which is a feather-like palm on the left side there. They die. And then you go out to the nurseries. What are they selling? Tons of queen palms. So, that's maybe a plant that should be left in a container and protected when we have a cold winter. Citrus. Well, lemons and limes took it hard. Satsuma mandarin oranges, particularly our Texas Superstar selections, probably fared much, much better. Citrus, we always recommend, and hopefully you go to our My Extension 210 YouTube channel and look at the archived webinar that we've done on landscape and patio citrus. We do not recommend planting young citrus directly in the landscape. We recommend growing them just like avocados, ideally 3 years or more in large containers, getting good wood on them, a defined root system, and planting them in April once they're established in the landscape. We do not recommend planting lemons and limes in the landscape. Of course, there's always exceptions, but I'm going to tell you, most of those exceptions, just as avocados, they're probably gone. They're gone. Now, citrus is uniquely different. Most citrus is grafted. If you look at the image on the left, towards the bottom of the plant, you see that plant tag. If you go a little bit above that, that's where it's grafted. The image to the right, about 3 inches off the ground, is the demarcation line of where it's grafted. Most citrus is typically grafted on sour orange rootstock. Sour orange rootstock, which is a very winter hardy rootstock and a very, very aggressive rootstock. If your citrus didn't make it, you are going to see a lot of push up below that graft point from that rootstock, which is very aggressive. You'll see straight upright growth with huge thorns, big leaves, or you see 3 little leaflets. And that's trifoliata rootstock, which is used more in Houston and east of us, but there are some in our landscapes here. So once you see that, immediately that needs to be removed, because if there's any top potential that's still alive, particularly on these larger, older trees, that they were in microclimates or somewhat protected, might come out on the top. So all the rootstock needs to come out immediately. And that's a good cultural thing to do, even when you're growing citrus. Never let rootstock push. Now, the tops on citrus is when leaves start falling off on these stressed winter plants, that's good. It's a good sign. That means there's a potential that life is still on the top. So that's what we told a lot of people soon after this significant, unique weather event that we had. Wait a week or two. Let's look at what's happening, okay? Everybody wanted to start trimming right away, particularly if they had brush pickup that week. Slow it down, folks, slow it down. So citrus, we only do pruning if indeed we see new growth start emerging in the springtime, okay? And you can kind of help this along by the woody portions of the top canopy. Scrape your fingernail, and if there's green, hey, guess what? There's potential here. If it snaps or it's right underneath this soft bark, if it's brown, it's gone. Okay, so it does need to be removed. But let's wait till new growth emerges if there's still life in the top canopy, and then you prune out the dead, what's left in it thereafter. So We've lost a ton of citrus. And like I said, the Satsuma mandarins, particularly Miho, Sito orange, and Arctic frost, older established trees are going to do much better than potentially lemons and limes. Okay, so we're going to talk about all the other stuff. I put some things together because I forgot my parrot Pete at the house, and we've been repeating this with hundreds of emails I've been getting in the medias that I've been working with. So this is guidelines for everything else. Remember, citrus and the palms are a little bit different. Everything else we're going into now, these are general guidelines to follow. Okay, so let's cut everything down to greenwood. Okay, cut everything down to greenwood. So you scrape the wood or you cut it slowly, dead green. That means above a leaf node, and we have a chance to do that. Some of these things, perennials and even evergreen shrubs that we'll be looking at here in a second, they might be dead to the ground. If the trunk does not pull out easily and it's still firm, that means there's opportunity here. But we don't want to cut them straight 100% at ground level. Leave about 4 inches of plant material so you know where the plant is located in your landscape, and wait. And we want to do this within the next 2 weeks here. Landscape tools are very important. We want to use a good quality, very sharp hand pruners, long-handled loppers, head shears, wear good quality gloves, long-sleeve shirt, probably glasses, protective glasses. The sago palms tips are very sharp. A piece of wood hitting your eye is not good. So always protection. Now, if it's above your capacity, your skill level, we don't want you guys on ladders. We, of course, don't want homeowners to be using chainsaws, but we know everything, and we you know how that goes. So safety. This is dangerous when we're using chainsaws and ladders and things. So if need be, hire a certified arborist. If you live here in the San Antonio area, surrounding area of San Antonio, there's a lot of good ones at the San Antonio Arborist Association. Just do a web search or contact a professional landscape maintenance person, and make sure they're bonded and insured. Just not a pickup truck that checks out when it's time for brush pickup. You want somebody, if something happens, and they know what they're doing, and talk to them. You're watching this webinar today, which will be archived as well. That way you have some knowledge to work with them as well. Do it yourself if you can. If not, get someone that knows what they're doing. The big thing, and I'm even hearing some so-called professionals out there, water. No. If your plants are dead or brown looking or not growing, don't just be wasting water. Let's use it wisely, particularly in the winter months on your lawns and landscapes. In lieu of a significant rain event, we do supplement irrigation from mid-September to March 1st or so, every 3 weeks, an inch every 3 weeks if we don't get a good significant rain event. So don't be wasting the water. And again, people are recommending fertilizing right now. If your plant is not actively growing, do not be wasting your money or your time, okay? We should wait till we see signs of new growth appearing when plants, after you clean them up, strip the brown leaves, do the adequate pruning we just talked about, and they look like they're ready to push out, then you use the 1959. Remember, we can use it mid-April, early May in your lawn, your spring and fall vegetable garden. But for all these plants recovering, use the 1959. We've been recommending this for 40 some odd years. Lightly fertilize and then do it again in 6 weeks. Remember, when we fertilize, we don't have the best soils. We have very high pH soils. We lack organic material in our soils, and we need nutrition. And nitrogen is the key. The 19 to get these plants to push in the spring and then harden off for the summertime. The mulch, we always are strong promoters of building our soil over time, right? We always recommend in Central and South Texas to use an organic double shredded hardwood mulch with compost, what we refer to as a living mulch. So now, till about May, let's kind of push that mulch away from these plants that we think are going to come out this spring, that we know that aren't 100% dead. Um, and let the soil warm up. If we can get that root and crown to warm up, it's going to help push out these plants a little bit better. And then around May, and again after the coming out of the heat of the summertime, y'all guys that have heard me in the past, our recommendations are based on science and fact and proven guidelines. They're very simple. These guys that were recommending super thrive and seaweed and molasses and things like that, it didn't work, folks. This was a cold spell, and that ain't gonna fix the dead plant. But plants that have a chance to come out, we do the 2-2-2. Twice a year, we replenish our organic double shredded hardwood mulch or living mulch, 2 inches thick, 2 inches away from the crown. But let the soil warm up, let the push out happen this spring, and then put some mulch around these plants, replenish again. So let's talk about evergreen shrubs. And I put a list here of what I've seen and what I've been getting inquiries about, but you can add a few more. That's why I didn't want to do straight to the chat, because then I would have a question on my Zoysia, my viburnum, my oleander. So I try to make this simplified for everyone here. Evergreen shrubs, which includes what we see in front of us here, and etc. others. Okay. Some of them might look like this. That's a picture of a xylosma. And some of them might have green tongue. Okay. So what do? We see if there's greenwood on the plants. We trim them down to the greenwood, which might be 20%, might be a third, might be a half, or it might be down to the ground if that trunk is green, 4-inch stumps, right? What we already talked about. Okay. A couple of plants here, oleanders. Oleanders, we tell people March 1st, this week. We tell them even if they don't freeze down, we still want to cut them to 4-inch sticks, because there's a disease called oleander blight, similar to Pierce's disease in the grape industry. So cut them back anyway, hard, possibly 4-inch sticks. They should push out again this spring. Remember, pruning is a dwarfing and rejuvenation, a cleanup process. Indian hawthorns, the Raphaeolipsis, that look real bad. A lot of them already look bad before this winter, like many plants, like Texas sage that are grown in shade, overwatered. Indian hawthorns the same way. Maybe it was already needed to be replaced anyway. We hold on to stuff. So it might need to be replaced anyway because it's in the wrong location. We're probably overwatering them anyway. Japanese yews, I remember this in the 80s. If you have a tremendous amount on junipers and Japanese yews, even if you trim out a lot of that dead debris, they look ugly. They're not going to come out of it. So if they're 6 feet or smaller or young, they might need to be replaced. Even if they have some life in them, they probably just need to be replaced. Now on these evergreen shrubs and even small trees, this is what Pittosporum's another one. Pittosporum's another one we can add to this. The slide on the right is what we really need to keep a good eye on. It's the splitting of these woody shrubs down low at the base, and like this one's planted too deep. We never plant plants too deep or put too much excess soil or mulch on them. So the one on the right side is planted too deep, right 2 inches. That needs to be moved away. But the splitting is the concern. Even if you trim them back and they have green, the challenge we have if these plants in general push out in the springtime is once that wood starts snapping like that, it'll either naturally fuse or departmentalize that wound, or the summer heat will kill them. So what we're looking on this winter recovery is short term, midterm, getting through the summer heat, and long term, and how to do all these plants, not evergreen shrubs and everything, look by mid-September. Ugly is ugly, right? Dead is dead. But does it look appropriate by mid-September? And if not, fall is for planting. Fall is for planting. And we might have to do replacing. And the challenge we have with fall is for planting, which we always recommend, because typically we have very, very mild winters. That's why people have lemons and limes and bougainvilleas and things like that in their landscape. But even fall is for planting this past 2020, a lot of those plants just didn't have ample time to really sufficiently harden off and establish before that unusual winter event. Ground covers. I'll put a few in here. Asian jasmine still has green, but a lot of ugly in it. Let's go ahead and mow those down halfway, mow them down, cut them down, weed whack them, fertilize right when that new growth pushes out. Star, Confederate jasmine, and a lot of these jasmine or ivy plants that we have trained on lattices and trellises, most of the tops are ugly, so you're going to have to detach, remove, cut back to the green wood and push it from the bottom and retrain them to these structures that we have. Fig ivy, boom. Fig ivy got hit hard. They shouldn't really be grown on brick anyway. I don't like it because I think it's the integrity of that brick. It probably messes up. A lot of those, cut them to the ground at this time. Keep an eye on them, see if they emerge by mid-April, early May. If not, again, that's the guideline. April, early May. If they're not pushed out, all these plants, then we do some replacement in the spring and watch, because June is hot, and over summer what we can, and then do other plantings as well in mid-September. Purple Heart, the Jew ground cover, frozen to the ground, but I'm real curious about this one. After we clean up the debris, see if they push out from the root. This is going to be a big test on Purple Heart, because usually that type of succulent ground cover is hardy. So I'll be very curious and see how that comes out as well. So a lot of it is just waiting, but don't overwater and fertilize until we see new growth push out. Next is woody and herbaceous perennials. We grow a ton of Texas Superstar perennials. That slide right there is rosemary. Pretty much all the low-growing rosemary that looks like this, replace it. It's gone. Upright rosemary that has 50-50 or some sprigs of green on it, even if you cut out all the ugly, you're going to have a few green sprigs, and then you're going to have the woody portion. I would replace those. I think you're wasting your time. And if you do replace rosemary, don't forget that the barbecue skewers, the Gorizia rosemary, is going to be officially Texas Superstar release. Look for that one and see how that performs in your landscape. There's lots of perennial salvias. Some are more woody than others. Again, we follow the rule of thumb, cut back to the greenwood or possibly 4-inch sticks and see what pushes out. Salvia greggii, Mystic Spires, salvia, and just be patient. Ferns, I think most of the asparagus and possibly foxtail ferns are gone, but you can cut them back and see how they come back. The wood fern, or what we refer to as river fern, they should come out after you do a cleanup on them. And then all your real hardy Texas Superstar hardy perennials, which are predominantly herbaceous, again, cut them back to the greenwood, cut them back to 4-inch sticks as long as it's green. And some of them, like firebush and Mexican bird paradise, they come back anyway from the crown. Again, if these plants aren't back by May 1st, they need to be replaced. But I'm pretty confident most of them, if you maintain them correctly throughout the year and had a very healthy plant to begin with, they should come back this spring, but be patient with them because these types of plants come back late anyway in the springtime. Esperanza, in and about way, just like oleanders. I'm kind of glad they froze back because they look much better when you cut them back anyway. So let's, if you have Gold Star Esperanza that was properly maintained, should be coming back. Roses, you're going to have to really open them up and clean them out to 3 or 4 main sticks, branches, stems. As long as you see green in it, cut out the big old ones. And most of the roses, particularly earth kind, landscape bush roses, should come back okay. If they're hybrid teas or more of the fancier grafted ones, again, keep an eye on that rootstock as you would do on citrus and fruit trees, that they don't shoot out below that rootstock. Ornamental grasses, cut them back hard. Muhly grasses and all these types of ornamental grasses, cut them back to the main crown where it's kind of very thick and bushy there. If they pull out real easy, you know they're gone. If they're still firm in the soil, they have an opportunity. So cut back, clean up. Remember, don't water unless it's been dry for 3 weeks, and start watering more going into spring, and fertilizing once we see the sign of new growth come out, and fertilize again in 6 weeks is a good rule of thumb for all these types of plants. Even prickly pear got knocked down hard. If your prickly pear, your century plant, your succulents, the top looks bad and you know ugly is ugly, that's not going to look any better, just like a palm leaf. Trim those back to the main stalk or to the growth. I think century plant and some of these agaves and these types of plants are going to really try to flower this spring, even when they're ugly, and when they completely die, hopefully you get pups on the side come out on them, which will be a replacement of your main plant or other plants, hopefully, that you can set in the landscape. But I mean, that says a lot when prickly pear got hit back pretty hard as well. Trees, a lot of questions on live oaks in general that are blistering, but that's why I tell people, take it easy. Don't get too excited. But if you look at live oaks and Mexican white oaks, or what we say Monterey oaks, they're shedding big time right now. So dropping their leaves is a good sign on plants. And we just got to wait. Remember, live oaks and Mexican white oaks push a lot of the old leaves to push the new ones for the springtime. So let's see how they look this spring, all the trees in general. You remember, we try to lessen the compactness of the soil. Aeration in our lawns will help. The mulching will help. Making sure that the main crown, the main flare roots, the buttress roots are exposed. So when you if you need an arborist out there, if you have a lot of dead wood from winter kill, get a certified and bonded arborist out there later. Maybe do some deep root injection at this time for feeding. Mexican olives, just like the one we've had for many years at the Alamo. And by the way, y'all know what today is, right, folks? Texas Independence Day. God bless our great state of Texas. March 2nd, 1836. And you know what happened 4 days after, right? Remember the Alamo. So we can't forget it. We got a lot of newcomers into Texas. Remember, we have deep traditions here, and you know, we love our state. Let's keep it that way, folks. Fruit tree. So Mexican olive, as we saw in the 80s, they're probably going to sucker quite a bit from the bottom or from the lower main woody portions, the main branches, the main trunks. A lot of these plants probably froze down to the cone of juvenility for survivability. So you trim out all that dead wood, once dead debris. Once you see the push of new growth come out, and then you can retrain them as a bush again. Fruit trees, I'm not sure. Hopefully you have extension recommended varieties. Some of the strawberry growers were hit hard south of here. They're delayed, but a lot of them should be coming back. The peaches and Stonewall and Fredericksburg, we just have to wait. and see what happens to them. And then flowering trees, the same thing. Even if we don't get that many flowers, we're just trying to rejuvenate a stressed tree, and hopefully we don't have a lot of dieback in their canopies as well. So the challenge of all these plants, turf grass, and everything that we talk about, if by April, May, we don't see a predominance of healthy plant pushing and looking good, by then, by early May, then replacement might be needed, but some plants are just slow to come out. But we want to transplant what we can in May because we have to go through June, July, and August heat. And then by September, we have to see what makes it through the summer heat on these freeze damaged plants. And then fall is for planting, because the heat of summer is going to take out a lot of these plants that pushed out for the springtime, short term, midterm, and long term, and then we go from there. So this is the time now. If you need any follow up, and I wanted to cover that because I think that's what's on a lot of people's mind is this freeze. So Denise will take some of your chats. Y'all can start chatting them in right now. It doesn't have to be just on freeze. Now we can answer some good horticulture related questions, and we'll wait a couple of minutes while y'all guys are chatting in right now with your questions. I want to talk about our Rodeo Tomato. The rodeo finished officially this last weekend, much smaller than normal, of course. But get your tomatoes here, a Ruby Grush tomato at your favorite independent nursery. And then our next educational webinar, it will be on spring lawn management, more in-depth information on lawn management, Tuesday, March 16th. Remember the websites, utilize them, a lot of great information there. This webinar will be answering questions here in just a second. Utilize our My Extension 210 YouTube channel. Please subscribe to it as well. We talked about citrus. We have an awesome webinar on patio landscape citrus. We have 4 or 5 archived lawn management webinars there as well. And we're limited on space on these webinars since they're free. So that's why we archive these so people that couldn't attend today can go look at them later. And then don't forget the radio show on Saturday, every Saturday with my radio mentor, Bill Rohde, who turns 80 years old here pretty soon. So let's answer some questions. What do we have, Denise? Or Ruby? I'm not sure who's doing the questions today.
It's me, David Ruby.
Okay.
So our first question in the chat was from Talit, but it looks like Talit that David already talked about pruning back the lantana and plubango. I hope that answered your question before. The next few questions are also about freeze, but about particular plants, David.
Okay.
Dr. Mary Beth Green would like to know what about her irises? That she has several large bushy iris plants, but they look dead on top. Should she?
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to go with this format today, because we're going to get every question, this plant, this plant, this plant. But irises, there's 2 or 3 main types of irises that we can grow here: German bearded iris, bicolored iris, etc. So we'll put them in the same category as perennials. And you can put cannas in there. You can maybe even put elephant ears in there. And you can maybe even put bananas in here. If the top's ugly, y'all know what to do. We trim them back down to the ground if need be. If it's real mushy at ground level, most likely they're gone. Okay, and what do? We wait, right? Like these other perennials. And if they're not out by late April, May, you know what needs to be done.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question is also about the freeze, but can you talk about aloe vera? What to do about aloe vera?
Yeah, that's a good question on aloe vera. We can put aloe vera with these cactus and succulents. And it's kind of weird on these aloe veras. There are many species of aloes out there. And some have frozen down to the ground and they're mush, but some of them look pretty good still. Some of them look pretty good still. So same thing. If it's mush and the plant pulls out, it's dead. Super Thrive and molasses ain't gonna fix it, or liquid seaweed. If the tips are brown, trim off the tips a little bit. And if you get fresh looking pups that emerge when it warms up and the mother plant looks kind of tired, I would just go with the pups and restart new plants in containers or wherever you have them in your landscape. But just follow the same guidelines as cactus and succulents as we talked about.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question is from Owen. Could you please repeat your 222 mulch guideline?
Definitely. Yeah. A lot of us lack organic material in our soil, and we want to kind of pull away the organic mulch away from these plants, particularly now in April, especially plants that we think are going to come out of this. So the soil can start warming up much quicker. And so around May, we put a 2-inch layer or push the mulch back and we replenish with a 2-inch layer, a thin layer, 2-inch layer of a good organic mulch. We really like this double shredded hardwood mulch with compost, which we refer to as a living mulch. Twice a year, we do that in about May before we go into the summer heat. And then we do it again coming out of the summer heat in September. 2 inches away from the crown of the plant. We never want excess mulch or soil on plants. We often plant plants to deep trees and things, so we got to be careful with that. But, when it's summertime, helps hold moisture in, so it goes back on the water, helps build the organic material. A good organic mulch, when it breaks down, becomes compost. And this is the best mulch that we should be using for central and south, most of the state of Texas. East Texas and Houston's maybe pine and things like that, pine and cypress. So in the wintertime, it really helps insulate a little bit, regulate soil temperature. So that's our 222, twice a year, 2 inches thick, 2 inches away from the crown of the plant.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question comes from Rita, and she would like to know a little bit more about pruning. Does she only prune leaves or also the stems on her plants?
And I presume that's related to winter kill. So yeah, if a leaf is dead or brown, start stripping those off, or when a plant drops its leaves, it has a better opportunity to push new ones out. Plants that are holding on to leaves is not going to be as good. So yeah, definitely strip the ugly as best you can, or shake them, see if they fall. If they drop, it's a better sign. And you just prune. You trim to where it's green. If it's dead, it's dead. And you prune to the green wood above a leaf node. And what do? We wait till late April or early May. Hopefully it pushes out, and then we relook at it again. There might be parts of the plant that push out and leaf out, and then some parts that are still dead that we help it along by trimming that out. And again, by mid-May or so, if these plants aren't pushing and strong, vigorous growth, what do? We replace at that time, or we replace in the September, October time frame if the summer heat took them out.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question comes from Robin, and she wants to know, when is a good time of year to harvest tangerines from her tree? That she always has too much fruit, but she would like to know a more specific date to put on her calendar.
Yeah, I want to invite her and our listeners that have to replace citrus or really want to work with citrus to please visit our My Extension 210 YouTube channel. We have a wonderful patio and landscape citrus webinar for much more in-depth information. Please subscribe as well. And we start harvesting our Christmas oranges. Satsuma Mandarin orange is really the best to grow here. including Miho and Cito, and then the orange and Arctic frost selections. We start harvesting as early as, depending on the selection, as early as Halloween, but the heaviest right before Christmas. And all the fruit should be pulled off by Christmas. Christmas oranges.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question is talks about St. Augustine. Could you talk a little bit more about the St. Augustine grass? And they're asking, should I let it be till April, or is there anything I can do right now? They sodded in October.
Yeah, well, hopefully you can attend this webinar we're doing on spring lawn management. The biggest challenge, as we mentioned, started our presentation, and I hope this format really helped y'all. I think this was a much better way to approach these questions that we're having, but we're reviewing some of these, which is fine. Our warm season turf grasses, be it St. Augustine, Bermuda, or Zoysia, you might have to mow if weeds come out. Keep them in check, and they're starting to wake up. Your warm weather grasses will start waking up. Do a light raking if you have a lot of brown grass clippings out there from the winter. Mow high just to kind of tidy up at this time, and never let a weed flower set seed. For sure, 100%. Even if you have to replace your lawn, I still want to get a pre-emergent out this week, either dimension or barricade. Always read and follow label instructions, how you apply and how much you use per 1,000 square feet. Don't forget core aerating and the lawn dressing, and then fertilizing. But you'll know by the second or third mowing before you fertilize uh, what needs to be replaced, or if you have weed patches, you kill out those weeds with a non-selective herbicide and resod. But we'll know when everything starts waking up. If you have more weeds than lawn, most likely, I doubt if it was the winter, unless it's very very young planting of 30 or 60 days, then we just poor overall general lawn maintenance. And again, on that My Extension 210 YouTube channel, we have 4 or 5 archived lawn management and pest management. And if you can attend this one, I think that would benefit you as well as our other listeners.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question is, when can a new spring garden be planted?
Yeah, we'll be covering that at the Cultivate. I think I'm talking about vegetable gardening at the Cultivate this Friday. So if you get a chance, go to the Bexar County Master Gardener website and sign up for that webinar if you're free Friday and Saturday for Cultivate. I'll be covering vegetable gardening, but March and April is when we start planting a warm season crops. So, and again, at the My Extension 210 YouTube channel, if you can't make it to the Cultivate and my talk this Friday, we have 4 or 5 in-depth vegetable webinars archived there as well.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question is from Jennifer, and she asked, I have a high slope downward that goes towards a green belt, and she needs to plant something that helps with erosion but doesn't get tall because she doesn't want to attract any sort of rodents or anything like that. And the area does get both sun and shade. What would you recommend?
Um, yeah, you need a ground cover to stabilize the soil and the overall maintenance. So probably this spring, make sure it's weed free. Really cultivate that soil, let it stay fallow for 30 days. Start doing that now when you're doing the prep and weed management before planting. So start sourcing good quality plants. But probably Asian jasmine would be a good one. Remember, on ground covers, the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, and the third year they leap. And again, we have growing ground covers and other plant considerations as ground covers webinar on the My Extension 210 YouTube channel.
Okay, David, our next question is from Donna. She says she has a lot of roly-polies. What would you recommend to control these?
Yeah, that's a good question because a lot of people think we're not going to have any insects because they all died. Of course, that's a crustacea, the roly-polies. But remember, insects are cyclic and they come out when your plants look the best when it warms up. So yes, and this is a good question. Yes, you're going to have insects when you plant new plants potentially, and when your plants leave out because they're already stressed. So that's why it's so important to follow our guidelines throughout the year on proper fertilizing, watering, mulching, pruning, et cetera, to alleviate insect as well as disease pressure, right plants in the right location, etc. So if you got a lot of roly-polies, the pill bugs, the ones that row are roly-polies, pill bugs that don't row are sow bugs, the crustacea. Go to your favorite independent nursery or garden center, be it Millburgers, Fanix, Rainbow Gardens, a garden center on Bandera, just to name a few good ones. And look for Sluggo Plus. Sluggo Plus, use it as recommended on the label, and that will get the population down. And remember, being a crustacea, they're related to mud bugs and shrimp and lobster, just FYI.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question comes from Chris, and he wants to know, where do I get living mulch?
Just what we just mentioned. Any good independent nursery will have it by the bag. Sometimes it's easier to move bags than by bulk, but if you need bulk, call New Earth Souls or Compost or one of their distributors or Gardenville, and you can buy bulk and they can help you with measurements if you give them the square footage.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question is from Cindy, and she says, when can she plant Heuchera, Cora bells now, or should you plant them in a pot or wait? She has a bag of bulbs.
Bulbs, you said bulbs, Ruby?
It's bulbs / rhizomes.
Plant them this week and see how they perform. Do some of your landscape in very well prepared beds in the shade or early morning sun, and some in real nice containers as well in the patio, and see how they come out.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Nancy, and she asks, should her showers of gold be cut back really low this spring?
I presume she's talking about Trialis. Oops, what happened here, David? What did I do here? Oh, sorry. Hold on. I think she's talking about Trialis, which is a perennial-like plant, and we follow all the guidelines that we talked about before, and we put that with this here. So what do, folks? We now in the next 2 weeks, we sharp pruners or loppers. We cut them down to the greenwood, or possibly down to 4-inch sticks if it's not too green. And then what do? We wait till wait till they bud and leaf out. We start fertilizing. We repeat the fertilizer in 6 weeks. We replenish that organic mulch in May. And if they don't look pretty by late April, May, they need to be replaced. But that's a pretty hardy Trialis. Showers of gold, yellow shower is a pretty hardy Texas superstar plant. So I think they should come out. And again, all these plants, we have to see how they look at the end of summer. And some of them might need to be replaced in the fall, but this plant should be okay.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question is from Holly. She asks, is corn gluten an acceptable herbicide?
I wouldn't say acceptable herbicide. Cornmeal is good for corn tortillas on Sunday with my barbacoa tacos, and Cornbread. I like jalapeno cornbread, but I always used to ask Malcolm Beck, the father of Texas organic gardening, the founder of Gardenville, and he never would give me a question on it. For that, for what you're asking, he always used to say it makes a good fertilizer because it has high rates of slow release organic nitrogen in it, but as a fertilizer, it's cost prohibited. As a pre-emergent herbicide, I think it's a waste of your time and money. And a lot of the nurseries and garden centers don't carry it much anymore because the weevils get into it. So follow this guideline if you want proper weed management in your lawn and in your flower beds. Mulch, and use a maize that works as a wonderful pre-emergent herbicide granule in your flower beds.
Okay, thank you, David. Just to let you know, we're up to the 2-minute mark till 1 p.m.
Okay.
And we do have a few more questions in the chat. So just
Okay.
let us know when the last question is to be asked.
Thank you.
So the next question is from Talent, and they say, my in-ground lavender seems to have no damage after the freeze. Should they do anything special to it, or the plant seems fine?
Yeah, some lavender species. She doesn't say the species, right, Ruby? No.
No, no.
Some species are much more winter hardy than others, and if you have some that are brown like this rosemary image, just replace it. Unfortunately, lavender is very short-lived plants, and they're very hard to grow here. The challenge is typically not winters on lavender. The challenge is overwatering them, poor soil drainage, and getting them through the summer heat. So let's see what happens and see how long they live for you. And if when they flower, that's an excellent plant for bees and beneficial pollinating insects as well.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question is from Cindy. She asks about her sweet olive tree, that all of the evergreen leaves have fallen. Do you think it's likely to return?
Yeah, I think sweet olive is going to fit on some of this evergreen shrub category. I think when we cut them down to the greenwood, they should reemerge from the crown, from the base of the plant. Sweet olive is one of my favorite plants. They bloom real early in winter, like January, February, typically. Um, so just let's see what happens. Cut them down to the greenwood and see how they perform and push out from the base and see how they look after you follow the water and fertility mulching program of spring, and see how they look in the fall time. Now, sweet olive is an ornamental, very, very unbelievable, fragrant blooming plant. Mexican olive is an ornamental tree. And of course, when you look at olives, landscape olives, that's why it's been such a big challenge to do a viable, let me rephrase that, a viable commercial olive industry for oil in the state. And the commercial olive industry for oil, they got slammed. And that's why we really haven't really been proponents of promoting that industry because of what just happened last week.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question is about the 1011 onions. Could you talk a little bit about them, like where to find them or how to grow them?
1015Y onions,
15.
1015Y onions. And 1015 represents October, the 10th month of the year. 15th, which is the date of planting seed in the Rio Grande Valley, and Y is yellow. And Dr. Leonard Pike and Dr. Leeper were the big parts of putting that as the Texas Super Sweet Onion series. They're too late to plant. If you find some and they look healthy, plant them and see what happens. We start putting out onion sets as early as mid-November, and the best time is to plant them in January. Okay, so if you planted them in January and they have green to them and the top looks bent over or broken, pull them out. You got to use them as a green scallion. If the plants have been well maintained and look still vigorous, then they might produce something uh, this spring. Let's just see what happens. If they got a little bit of yellow tips on them, just leave them alone or cut those off. Remember, every leaf of an onion represents of the bulb. 11 to 13 big leaves represents a big onion bulb for onion rings. So keep the weeds down, keep them well watered and well fertilized, and let's see what they produce. Otherwise, what I'm afraid of a lot of these onions, if they were stressed, is they're bolting. And if they start shooting up that flower stalk down the middle, pull them ASAP and use them as green onions. They're never going to be a big bulb, unfortunately. And that has to do with these temperatures before. Remember, it was 82 degrees, folks, before it got super cold for that duration. And now look at the weather now. So a lot of these plants are super confused. And what does flowering mean? Plants flower to set seed for survivability. So we're going to see a lot of bolting early on some of these plants that were planted earlier in January. So we just got to see and wait and see what happens.
Okay.
We'll do two more questions, okay, Ruby?
Okay. So our next question comes from Alicia, and she's wondering about planting seeds. Is right now a good time to plant vegetable or flower seeds?
Um, the month of March is traditional, early April at the latest. So all your vegetable seeds that we do is possibly cucumber seed, squash and zucchini seed, bush beans. So you call it. If let's see how the weather is in March. But what do we say? March 20th, spring. March 15th is traditionally our last frost date. Remember, it's weather, by the way. But we've had cold spells as early as first week or so of April. So you call the shot. The problem with seed is shortages this year because everybody's gardening and then shortages around the world. But plant some early, hold on to some of the seed, do multiple plantings. But same with the flowers. Otherwise, look for healthy transplants for mid-March. But most of your warm weather crops are planted mid-March, and by April to April 15, we want most of these planted. And don't forget that we're doing that webinar at Cultivate Friday, so maybe you can register for Cultivate on the Bexar County Master Gardener website too, on vegetable gardening.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question is from Lon, and he wants to know, is society garlic root hardy?
I'm not going to answer that question because we've never had a freeze like this. So y'all are going to have to help me with that question. So follow the guidelines, what we talked about. If the top's ugly, we strip off the brown leaves, we cut them down, not to ground level, but where the base is nice and firm. If the plant is nice and firm and it's not mush, yes, it should come back this spring. We hope. And then we need to evaluate it after, we water, we fertilize, we keep the weeds down, we mulch them, what we've covered about numerous times in today's webinar. And then we see how they look in the fall, and then that's the answer. Short term, mid-term, long term. I think they should come back. I hope they come back like all the other plants that we've talked about today. I gave y'all guidelines. This webinar will be archived when Ruby gets a chance. Give her a few days. And we have a lot of other subject matter on the My Extension 210 YouTube channel. Remember, these have been free, so please help us out and subscribe. Listen to me every Saturday with my radio mentor, Bill Rohde. And if we didn't get to all your questions or you need follow-up questions, we covered pretty much freeze recovery with this webinar. That's why I set it up a little bit different platform today. And if your plant falls into the categories that we covered, follow these guidelines that we talked about. You have my email address. Send me emails if you need something identified. Send quality images attached to these emails, not part of the email. Good information. I'm putting up these last two slides for the guidelines that we talked about for most of the things. Of course, palms and citrus are a little bit different, but if you follow these two guidelines of what to do on freeze recovery, and then we look at April and May and replace what is needed, and what made it or did not make it through the summer, we replace for fall. So I know this is hard, folks. Just imagine if you were a farmer with thousands of acres of fruit or vegetable. Our prices are going up like everything else in the economy will be going up, fuel and everything in the next 2 years with everything. But we're going to have to pay a little bit more for plants, for seed, for landscape material because of shortages, labor issues, labor, etc. So hopefully y'all's landscapes can and will recover, and we plant what we need to plant. We plant Texas Superstar plants for sure, as much as we can. You can see more of the Texas Superstar plant program on the Aggie Horticulture side. I hope y'all learned a little bit today. Thank you, Ruby. Thank you, Denise. And happy gardening, everyone. And thank y'all for joining us today. David Rodriguez.